Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, April 17th. Wow, already April 17th, 2023. Time for another show. I guess tax day has come and gone over the weekend, which reminds me we should pay those things. Anyway, all right, they're all taken care of. Don't worry about it, but it's not the big cultural boogeyman it is for conservatives who claim to be freaked out about taxes. Oh, tax day. Anyway, nobody cares. Just pay and get it over with and pay your fair share, and that's why it's such a scary thing to do. Oh my God, fair share, that's, so much more than I actually pay. So that's why taxes are such a huge concern for people like that. Everybody else, well, I know about how much I make, and I know about what percentage is supposed to go in taxes, and I don't have any cheat codes, so this is it. Easy. All right, well, not necessarily easy, and never easy to part with all your money, but if you've been paying along the way, then it's not quite so uncomfortable, and sometimes you might even get that money back if you use that mechanism to take care of your taxes. Overpay a little bit at a time, and then get a nice big refund, and then go do something consumery with it. That's what I think normal people do. Everybody else who's complaining about it, the 12 people who each have $85 billion apiece, well, probably shouldn't take their word for it about how painful tax time is, because it's not painful for them. They're not paying any. All right. Let's see. Other items up for consideration besides tax day, which really didn't, I don't know. They didn't, maybe it's being away from Twitter that helped, smooth over the fact that it was, or maybe it was the fact that it was over the weekend. I don't know. By the way, since it was on Saturday, did they keep it? Sometimes when it's on Sunday, they bump tax filing day to the 16th so that everybody can mail them on Monday. But on Saturday, I guess you can mail them. I don't know. I don't know whether they bump those until Monday or not. Okay. Well, hopefully you didn't have to find out, because yours were all taken care of and you had no such worries over the weekend. I was doing other things. I was driving all over creation yesterday. And so it makes today seem a little bit strange. I'm not quite, oriented to the landscape yet. But hey, we can get oriented. It's easy enough to do. I check social media, find out what's going on, see what there is to discuss today, and there is plenty. Okay, let's see. What do I got here? I got an answer about the Tuesday this year. Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Mom. Mom has an accountant in the house, so she's able to check. So Tuesday the 18th. Why not Monday, though? I mean, Monday is the first business day. It's fine. Give people two chances to do it. That's always, I think, part of why they had Tuesday as election days, that they figured everyone will forget on Monday because it's the day after. All right, well, because it fell on Saturday, it would ordinarily be on Monday. Oh, but it's a DC holiday today? Monday, April 17th. What is it? My NAFTA calendar has been replaced by generic white bread, we don't know anything calendar, and so there's no anything. I don't know what the DC holiday is today. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Greg Dworkin knows. Maybe that's why, maybe it's a holiday in Connecticut too, and so he's up early and ready to go. Good morning, Greg. Do you know what holiday it might be today?
It's UConn is still the basketball champion day.
Probably in Connecticut, yes. All right. Well, at any rate, apparently tax filing deadline is extended to Tuesday this year, and in part because of the 15th falling on Saturday, and in part because the 17th is a holiday, and I don't even know what it is. I'll see if I can figure it out. All right.
I don't know.
So, I'll look while you tell us what awesome things you had to say.
Well, it's a relatively quiet news day. I'm not only not that much into tax day, I'm also not that much into Jim Jordan is holding bullshit hearings in New York Day.
Wow.
Cable's going to cover that a little bit, but he's in New York, so he could talk to Eric Adams about why there's more crime in Ohio than New York, as Eric Adams pointed out this morning. But he's also going to try to pretend that somehow or other Alvin Bragg is a bad person. And the funny thing is, because it's such a quiet week, today would be an absolutely fantastic day for a federal indictment to drop.
It would be a fine day if it weren't for the federal holiday, apparently, or at least the DC holiday. So it's Emancipation Day, which, it's April 16th, but because that was a Sunday, they moved it to a Monday, and there you go. Now,
but every day's a good day. And,
sure.
if one drops today and one drops tomorrow or two drop next week, that'd be all right. In about 2 weeks, we're expecting Fannie Willis to drop hers, like first week of May. So, stuff's coming, and everybody's sort of waiting for it. And I thought, we don't always have a theme. Sometimes we have a theme for the show, my segment of the show, sometimes not. And I thought, if anything, we should talk about what people don't want to talk about.
All right.
That would be the theme for today's show.
Okay.
Let's start with Fox News. Fox News doesn't want to talk about the truth.
Okay.
There was supposed to be a trial starting today, despite the fact that it's Emancipation Day somewhere.
Yes, right. But this is going to happen in Delaware.
It's not going to start because there are rumors that Fox is now trying to settle.
I would.
The day before the trial. It's not clear that Dominion's interested. Mm-hmm. But there's, $1.6 billion at stake, plus a bunch of apologies they have to make every hour to satisfy Dominion. So I'm not sure how that works.
How much is this suit worth? I forget. No one ever tells me.
Yeah, that's a really expensive suit you're wearing.
Thank you.
How much does it cost? Well, $1.6 billion. Yeah. Does it look good? And, well, it suits you.
Don't wear it. It doesn't look good on you, but, okay. Well... All right. Yes. So a delay, and that is the rumor. And I don't know. You got to wait, I guess, and find out. It would be, I don't know whether it's difficult to imagine a settlement at this point or not. I mean,
anything's possible. Everything is so unprecedented. So
they got to figure there's more damage coming, and they probably have some idea of what.
But that's been true for a long time. They should have known that.
Yeah.
If they didn't know that, they need to hire more lawyers.
Oh well. Yeah, I don't know that they have good lawyers, but they must know what else is coming. And
I'm guessing they have better lawyers than Trump.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's almost.
For example, we don't know what their names are. That alone tells you they're better lawyers.
Yeah, right. They focus on the.
Although I don't know if they have anybody named Trusty or Honest John or people that inspire confidence.
John
so there's that. Then there's something we've covered, but I think it's worthwhile. This is from a piece we talked about last week in Rolling Stone. We're getting killed on abortion inside Trump's secret meetings with the religious right. But what brought that to mind is because although it's still true that they're getting killed on abortion politically, they continue to try to figure out ways to not talk about it, as if that's going to work.
All right.
This particular segment comes from a tweet that was inspired by a tweet of mine.
Oh.
I had tweeted about the fact that they're really going out of the way to really not talk about what they really stand for, as if that's going to work, as if people like Tim Scott, who declared his presidential exploratory committee on Fort Sumter.
Right.
Subtle. When asked about his stance on abortion was humma. I'm for the most conservative thing, but don't ask me about I don't want to talk about maybe 15 weeks is okay, but whatever. I mean, it's just a complete word salad that makes no sense. So I pointed out that they really, really, really don't want to talk to this. And Swin, one of the authors of this Rolling Stone piece, tweeted me and said, Rolling Stone spoke to half a dozen longtime GOP strategists working on races for next year, almost all of whom say they're advising their candidates to talk as little as possible about GOP abortion proposals at this time. As if that's going to work.
Yeah. No one wants to mention that.
As if that's going to work. But here's the exact quote. While the inter-party debate rages, the losses are piling up. In heavily contested Wisconsin Supreme Court race last week, a Democrat staunchly supportive of reproductive rights beat an anti-abortion Republican by 11 points in a race that was expected to be close. And in a swing state, Trump won in 2016 and barely lost in 2020. And then I should remind people, one of the other things that people don't want to talk about, but at least they did in Rolling Stone with that piece, that segment, that clip I just read.
All right.
Is that this is nominally a nonpartisan race.
Oh, the judicial.
The Wisconsin judicial race didn't really have, I mean, he calls them an anti-abortion Republican. They are.
Yeah.
He said a Democrat staunchly supportive of reproductive. She is.
Right.
You're not supposed to declare which party you are in these races.
Wink, wink. All right.
And what happened is the Democrats said, that's bullshit. I am a Democrat staunchly supportive of reproductive rights. The Republican opponent I have is staunchly against them. And the Republicans said, that's not how we do it here. Wink, wink, as you said. Everybody knows this is a nonpartisan race, and this is all about judicial temperament, and God damn it, I can't believe you're making me say this. and so he lost. And everybody knows what it was, but you're not supposed to talk about it. So, that's why I thought it fit in this theme.
It's an interesting thing. Republicans, like, getting upset that norms are being violated.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so bizarre. But everybody knows that one's a Democrat and one's a Republican. So this is in a swing state. Trump won in 2016 and barely lost in 2020. The Wisconsin wipeout followed a dismal showing for the GOP in the midterms, where they failed to capture the Senate and underperformed in the House. And Trump is blaming Doug Mastriano, who hopefully will run for Senate and do it again. So we have all of that going
and blame him again.
Now, the next item here, and we all know it, but we don't want to talk about it, is Dianne Feinstein.
Yes.
And it's just astounding to me. One of those shocking but not surprising sort of things. That the whole issue about Feinstein is about politics. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that she can't do the job. That's not even up for discussion.
Right. Well, that's a kind of a wink, wink too.
But she can't do the job. And so this is Kristen Gillibrand over the weekend defending Feinstein amid resignation calls from some Democrats, which of course got people upset because she wasn't so reticent about going after Al Franken. Now, I'm not opening the debate over whether Franken should or shouldn't have resigned. I love Al Franken, but, what he did was, basically unacceptable. So, but does it get you out of the Senate when all these other things that the senators do? Well, we have different standards than the other party. But maybe not, because here's Kristen Gillibrand saying we've had so many senators who've had illnesses, whether it's Mitch McConnell's illnesses or senators who've had strokes. And McConnell is, in fact, coming back to the Senate this week. Now, what Gillibrand glosses over is the illnesses she's describing are things you recover from.
Yes, right.
You don't recover from losing your capacity to do the job.
Yeah,
it's not like it gets better with time. It actually gets worse with time.
Yes, that's the reality of what we're talking about. So
now, Feinstein had already announced she's not running for re-election in 2024, and that was under pressure. But amid her lengthy absence, the first public call for Feinstein to resign came Wednesday with Roka Hanna. And we talked about the fact that this is a San Francisco group, Pelosi defending her. Feinstein's from San Francisco, former mayor there. Gavin Newsom is from the San Francisco area. And that cabal in California is blocking the way for many ambitious younger Democrats from other parts of the state who also happen to be less centrist than Feinstein was. So there's a lot of dynamics going on in California. And in fact, I came across this piece, which was interesting, from Politico back in February.
All right.
Called Why California Was Over Feinstein's Retirement Before It Happened. You may recall Adam Schiff and Katie Porter were talking about running even before she retired. Yeah, that's part of what forced her to retire.
Yeah. Okay, I can understand that.
But, and then Barbara Lee is talking about getting in the race. I think Barbara Lee wanted to be appointed by Newsom. But if she's running, I don't know that Newsom would do that. Part of the interesting thing is, if Feinstein does step down, what will Newsom do?
I mean, something.
Well, he'll do something, but one of
him.
the interesting names being passed around is Barbara Boxer. In other words, what you do is you do an interim that doesn't offend anybody, and you pick Boxer if you can talk her into it, because she already knows the rules, and so her learning curve would be pretty, flat in getting up to speed about what's going on. And why would you do that? To get the judiciary nominees done.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the work gets done. She's temporary, holding the place for the election in 2024.
Right. So that would be the smart thing to do.
Idea.
You'd have to convince Boxer to do it, of course. And before that, Feinstein would actually have to agree to resign.
Yes.
But the other move that Gavin Newsom would be expected to do, and I don't know California politics well enough to tell you what this is he appoints his biggest political enemy, who might be running against him next time. You find out who it is, and then you stick him in the job, and then you get him out of the way. So that would be the other smart political thing to do, if there is such an entity.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. So, okay, I don't know.
What you don't do is you don't appoint Schiff or Porter or Lee.
That's not... Yeah, I mean, you do that if you intend to come out and endorse them.
Or retire yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yes, that's true. I guess that's possible. But
then you don't care. But, you give one a leg up, you get everybody else mad at you. So
yes. Right.
That's not likely to happen.
All right.
The 89-year-old California senator's decision to retire at the end of her term, which took place back in February, mostly confirmed assumptions both nationally and back home. In fact, the main question on the minds of candidates was whether she'd make it to the end before stepping aside. And here it is 2 months later, and I guess I understand why that came up.
Right.
She insists she will back in February, but I'm not sure that's true.
I mean...
What effect does it have on California?
People insist a lot of things.
This goes and interviews a whole bunch of Democratic operatives who say it doesn't make any difference. Everybody knew this.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Are you having misgivings about pushing out the longest-serving woman senator? Well, pretty much non-existent in California. Does it matter? Not a lick, a fellow named Herman said. Look, Schiff and Porter had kickoff rallies already. If anything, they're holding back. It doesn't make any difference. Go ahead, push her.
Yeah, I guess at this point.
That's why, putting Gillibrand's comments in perspective is just so weird. Like, everybody in California knows she needs to go and that she's going.
Yeah.
What's Gillibrand doing? Why defend her? There's so many ways of, weaseling out of it altogether. Well, it depends on her. Just leave it at that and move on.
Yeah, well, she's running too, isn't she? So I guess there must be some people up in arms in her circles in New York. Oh, how come nobody's...
I doubt it. Nobody's up in arms about Feinstein.
There's
who in the world is
bi-coastal
up in arms about Feinstein? And again, all of those considerations skip over the fact that she cannot do the job.
Yeah. No, I imagine that there's a certain overlap between people who were fretting about taxes and people who are fretting about Feinstein. See what I mean?
Which is to say nobody?
Yeah, a very small select few for whom filing taxes is a major undertaking. Other people have to do it for them. I mean, it's an issue, don't get me wrong,
but it's not a big political issue. It's dominating the news any more than Feinstein's need to retire is.
No, but, weird things occupy the minds of people sitting on piles of money.
As well as, sitting in the Senate.
Yeah, well,
it's
unfortunate, but true. And she's, this is no joke. Like California, it's bad enough they only have 2 senators for the 850 bazillion people they have in the state. And when one of them is, mostly absent and unable to do the job, that's a tremendous problem.
It's so weird looking at, say, compared to New Hampshire. Yes. Like California has 850 bazillion people and 2 senators.
Yeah.
New Hampshire has 2 people and 850 bazillion people that serve in their House.
Yes, that's true. It's an odd situation. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's people need to have senators. They just, I don't know. Maybe there are people who certainly argue that there's no need for the Senate, but that's a different question.
Well, the main purpose of the Senate is to not be the House. Unfortunately, that's changing.
But just be right. Yeah. All right. Well, the controversy continues.
All right. Another thing that people talk about but don't talk about, And sometimes you don't talk about things that are real. Sometimes you talk about things that aren't real. This one is, of course, about wokeness, CRT, and attacks on the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something we covered on the show back on April 4th. Navigator research.
Oh, okay.
Navigator surveys had a poll. A majority of Americans say Republicans should spend less time talking about wokeness, 55%.
Yes.
That's a net plus 31, including Democrats plus 39, independents plus 30, and not very conservative Republicans plus 28.
Okay.
Even a plurality of very conservative Republicans agree, 41%, which is to say a plus 16. So the idea that works is that schools' issues are funding and safety.
Okay.
It's always funding, and now it's safety, and for good reason, Uvalde, et cetera.
Yes.
It's not wokeness and whether or not that should be taught in schools.
Good.
And that is paired with a relatively new article, April 17th, which is today, from Politico. Why GOP culture warriors lost big in school board races this month.
Yes. Okay.
Don't assume that a blanket message on critical race theory or transgender issues is going to claim every district, one GOP activist said. Unfortunately, a lot of this has to do with a misreading of what happened in your home state of Virginia.
Yes, and in particular in my home county.
Yes,
Loudon.
Glenn Youngkin won, and therefore that meant that wokeness was the way to go. And I said at the time, and people got mad at me, maybe even yourself, but I said at the time, part of the reason Youngkin won is because McAuliffe was a pretty bad candidate who opened his mouth at the wrong time and said the wrong thing in the wrong place.
He used to be a good candidate, or, he knew how to win and had been governor, and he wasn't exciting, that was for sure, but
he lost, and he was seen as old politics.
That will ruin you.
That's part of what's going on here, and so Youngkin was falsely elevated as the new way to do things.
Yes,
which was helped along by big mouths like Chris Rufo. Yes. Who yelled and screamed and kicked about the fact that this is the way to go, to the point where Ron DeSantis saw him and he got DeSantis' attention, and DeSantis appointed him to do that with the Florida public education system, particularly at college level. We'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, what really happened is that all of the Republicans who wanted to follow Moms for Liberty and run for school board everywhere basically lost 2 out of every 3 races they had. That's really what this article is about. Good. And especially tracking Wisconsin and Illinois, one a swing state and one a blue state. The article points out that there's no national clearinghouse for school board elections. So it's really hard to click on a site and say, oh, well, this is what happened overall. See, CNN has all the school boards here with a map. So you could see who won who. They don't do that.
Yeah,
you really have to work hard to try to figure out what's going on. And there's no official overall tally of school board results in states that held an array of elections on April 4th. 2 conservative national education groups did not dispute that their candidates posted a losing record.
All right.
And liberals are now making the case that their winning bids for school board seats in Illinois and Wisconsin show they can beat back Republican attacks on divisive education issues.
Good. It's about time.
Which is to say that Youngkin's play doesn't work.
Excellent. Which is to say that the doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on it down in Florida may be on some shaky ground. And what do you know? Chris Rufo may have
abortion thing. So one of the things people don't talk about. They do talk about, look at Ron DeSantis and what he's doing to Florida, and it's all in service of his presidential bid.
Profiles now.
And what they don't talk about the fact that it's not going to work. It's actually hurting him.
The garbage he's decided to double and triple and quadruple down on is not working, and maybe never did, and Chris Rufo may just be a giant grifter, and maybe you shouldn't have put all your eggs in that basket, or litter box for that matter.
There are 2 big teachers unions, NEA, the larger one, and AFT, which is the more active one. In some places, like New York, they're one union called United Teachers.
Fusion ticket.
Yeah.
Go to New York.
It's one of the things my late mom, as a teachers union person, worked on very, very extensively. There's no reason to have two unions when one big one is better.
Union. It makes sense.
But Kim Anderson, executive director of the National Education Association labor union, said, the takeaway for us is that parents and community members and voters want candidates who are focused on strengthening our public schools, not abandoning them. Mm-hmm. Results from Milwaukee and Chicago are hardly the last word on the matter. Thousands more local school elections are set for later this year in some 24 states, often low turnout, low profile, and officially nonpartisan, like the Wisconsin judicial one.
Right. Wink.
Wink, 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 right? And there's one of the things you don't talk about is that, of course, they're political and people need to get active. We were just talking in our town. In Connecticut, by the way, there was an article in the local paper, the News Times. I don't have it at my fingertips. But officially, there were 35 situations where books were challenged in the public school system, and all 35 lost. This is a article that was profiling the head of the Connecticut Library Association.
Yeah, good. I mean,
who also happens to be the director of our local library.
Well, that makes sense, and good. I mean, that's exactly what has to happen. Is everybody has to realize, these weirdo nudniks get in their head that you can become semi-famous and maybe gain political power by starting a book banning drive locally, and if you come out and embarrass them, maybe they'll go away.
Right. So, one of the things we talk about here locally is, we have to get out and vote because, these things are happening and we understand they're happening and they think they have the only people who are noticing. That can't be. We all have to get out and vote. And so, that's part and parcel of it. So what I'm seeing locally matches what this article is talking about nationally.
Good.
And that is one of those things that people really need to talk about. This is totally partisan, and you have to get out and vote in your local elections each and every time.
Yes. All right. Well, very good. That is good news, and I'm glad to hear that there's another explanation for Youngkin. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I bet there's more news. There might even be more news about the news we were talking about.
Well, I found an article from the American Library Association pointing out they track the data on a calendar year basis, and there was a record 2,571 unique titles which were targeted for censorship in 2022, a 38% increase over the 1,858 titles the year prior.
Okay.
Connecticut did not officially ban any books that year, and the state with the most bans was Texas, just so you know. So Florida's really annoyed, so they're going to try and catch up.
Yeah, they'll compete between them. Or maybe they'll fly banned books from one state to another and then drop them in Martha's Vineyard or something.
Right.
Okay. Boo on them. And as I commented just before, or just as the break started, for Chris Rufo, he's just glad that the check from Florida cleared before everybody found out that it was a big scam, and I don't know. We'll see how long his grift lasts.
Right. So when I was putting together my pundit roundups for the weekend, one of the things that happens when I put together a pundit roundup, and this is a little bit less relevant,
angel gets its wings
for a podcast or radio show or however you want to look at this.
Whatever this
is I spent a lot of time trying to find the right picture for whatever theme I think I'm going with.
All right.
And sometimes that's rather difficult. I'm going to send to you a couple of pictures of what I thought were interesting takes on the no Justins, no peace situation.
Tennessee, yeah.
In Tennessee, because it was really hard to find good pictures of them. A lot of the places we normally go to for contemporary or, what's in the news sort of pieces just didn't have them.
Oh.
So I found this one that I sent you, a black man holding up a sign that says, "No Justins, no peace, Tennessee 3." Mm-hmm. And I had to get it from a German site.
Huh.
Because there were no American sites that had this picture or pictures with the signs on it.
Weird.
That said...
I mean, it was a big story. Everybody reported it.
So, and I think I attribute that to the decline in local news. There just weren't enough people doing that. There were a couple of really fantastic pictures. Well, people would take them and, sell it to whatever outlet. And in this particular case, it was a German outlet who licensed it for one-time use only. So, you can't use it in other stories. And other people can't use it on the site, which is unfortunate. That's not always the case. And, there was another picture that I saw that Newsweek had, which I'm trying to find. And it was an absolutely fantastic picture.
Taken by an Albanian.
What it was Justin Jones, one of the Justins.
Yeah.
Who was talking about, what was going on in the Tennessee House, and the Speaker of the House was standing behind him on the big podium with his arms crossed and a big frown on his face. It was just a wonderful picture that I unfortunately couldn't find to license and therefore use.
Yes.
But it was just an amazing picture. And if you look at the expression on his face, and I'll try to find it for you and send that as well, it really tells you what's going on. It's amazing how difficult it is sometimes to find just the right picture. And sometimes you see the right picture and then you can't use it, which is really, really frustrating. But that's a great one, and I wanted to send it to you. The one I picked was pretty good, too.
Story just all by itself. The difficulty of finding these pictures in circulation in the United States. It's our story, everybody. We should be telling it.
Right. And so, part of the reason I'm mentioning it here. But in any case, the Tennessee 3 is a big story. The person who, Cameron Sexton, who is the speaker, failed in trying to suppress these young men from doing what they do. Not only are they both back in the Tennessee House, subject to the next election, but they were both unanimously reappointed by their local councils. But the spotlight on Tennessee then uncovered a whole bunch of stories about the fact that the speaker doesn't live in the district he represents. He lives in Nashville.
Right.
That he's been collecting per diems for going back and forth when he doesn't go back and forth because he lives in Nashville.
Bad.
There are all sorts of other rumors about him that I certainly won't mention names about. Perhaps
Trump. I don't know what.
Other things that he may or may not have done. And the reporters are saying, well, it's unfair to mention this and bring in other people. I'm just saying there's a whole bunch of rumors circulating around him now that the spotlight is on him.
I saw the story about his not going back to the district and buying a big house in Nashville, which, it makes sense that he would have a place to stay in Nashville. He's going to be spending a lot of time there, but you can't
5 months.
Pretend you are going
5 months.
Back.
That's how much time they spend there. So you want to have two houses, that's fine, but people say he doesn't live in the one in his district.
Yeah. Well, that's fairly common too. A lot of people do that, and they rent a place. I mean,
that's one of the things you don't talk about. Right? I mean, how many people like Mark Meadows really don't live in the district they claim to represent?
Yeah, I don't know. But, I mean, we've done that story, like you said, with Meadows. I mean, we spent how long on it for Rick Santorum, who doesn't matter anymore. But that was his thing, too. He had a gigantic family with 18 people in it, and he rented like a 3-bedroom bungalow next to his parents. You know, no, he doesn't live there. He lives in Virginia in a big $750,000 house. So, I don't know. It just seems to be a habit and it seems to catch up with Republicans more often than it does Democrats. There must be Democrats doing it somewhere. It's a pain in the ass to go back and forth between your district and the capital, even in state. But okay. Oh, there's the picture.
Yeah, I found the picture. It's from Getty,
Mongolia,
but it's not licensed in a way that we could get to it easily. Unfortunately, at least not at the moment.
Okay.
But it's an absolutely fantastic picture that just tells you the entire story.
Nice. And a white suit, too, looking very...
Justin Jones has a white suit and looking very spiffy.
Yeah.
And then the blue suit guy behind him on the podium with his arms crossed looking like he's actually in a coffin.
He does. And he's framed by that, I don't know what you would call that, architectural feature, but it does make it look like he's in a
sort of an arch behind him. That literally makes him look like he's got his arms folded and sitting in a coffin. So, which is about what happened politically to him.
Okay.
Now, people say, but he still has his job and so on and so forth. A whole lot of stories about the fact that people in Tennessee are really pissed about this. And what are they doing? They're starting to register. So this may be the awakening of the Democratic Party in Tennessee.
Cool. I'd like to zoom in on what's on the laptops of the legislators that are visible, but... I don't have one of those magic things where I say enhance, and
exactly.
It just works.
So here's a piece in the Harvard Gazette featuring Don Della Volpe, who does a lot of polling on young people, and just as a reminder to us olds about what we mean by young people, Gen Z are people aged 10 to 26 who were born from 97 to 2013.
All right.
Okay. Gen X is anybody born from 65 to 80.
1865.
Boomers are 81 to 96. And boomers are 46 to 64. So I'm a boomer, right in the middle of that.
All right.
But the Gen Z folks, they are incredibly active, and they are voting. And Scott Walker of all people blames them for why the nonpartisan Republican lost the nonpartisan judicial race in Wisconsin.
I mean,
it's those young people. They came out and voted. They're being indoctrinated, he said. Send me money and I'll fix it.
I gotcha. Right. Send me a ham sandwich and a haircut and I'll fix it.
Send me a ham sandwich and it'll get indicted.
Right. Okay. Well, that's terrible that young people have figured out what's happening in the news.
Right. So the Harvard Gazette, polling expert points to backlash after expulsion of 2 black Tennessee legislators in their 20s after gun control rally in wake of Nashville school shooting. That wraps up a whole lot of things in that headline. It does. We have the Gen Z folks voting. We have, of course, the Tennessee 3. We have a backlash in Tennessee. We have a gun control rally being the center of it. That's really what's motivating people voting on schools, not CRT and woke stuff. It's safety.
Yeah.
And so all of that is happening. The expulsion of 2 black state Democratic lawmakers in their 20s by the predominantly white Republican-controlled Tennessee House in late March ignited backlash across the country. Representatives Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, no Justins, no peace, were ousted for rallying in the House with local activists and student protesters in support of stricter gun controls. People have to remember what the original protest was all about, and it was the shooting in Nashville.
Right, it just happened.
Which just happened. And they were both voted back into office. What started as a modest gun control protest outside the Tennessee State House erupted into a national cause. I mean, really, Cameron Sexton did a great job in elevating a small local issue into a giant national cause.
Yes, I mean, it should have been one anyway, but yeah, for some reason it never gets covered that way. They get covered as local tragedies, even though
so Jones
there's
and
one in
Pearson
every
characterized
city.
the whole effort as an effort to silence Gen Z voices, as if Gen Z wasn't already, going to come out and vote. The incident is yet another example of the political potency of Gen Z. The 70 million young Americans born between 97 and 2012 here, aged 11 to 25, according to their reckoning. Since 2018, members of Gen Z have become politically engaged in issues like gun control, the environment, reproductive health, education, and racial justice, and increasingly running for office. This is the group of people most dissatisfied on the Democratic side of the ledger with Biden, and most dissatisfied with the Democratic Party, and often won't even call themselves Democrat. But if you're running against Trump and Republicans, they're going to vote Democrat because, as Joe Biden is very fond of saying, I'm not running against the Almighty. I'm running against the Republican, or words to that effect.
Okay.
And he's right. And so, yeah, Biden isn't perfect by any means. And yes, I wish he were younger. And it's not exactly my ideal of what a president should be, but he's doing a pretty good job. And look who he's running against. And that's the end of that.
Well, yes, it's tough to convince those 11-year-olds sometimes, but
the Gazette spoke with John Della Volpe, director of polling for the Institute of Politics. They conduct the twice annual Harvard Youth Poll, and he says they're the most diverse, most educated generation in American history. And like other cohorts of Americans who have seen their share of trauma and chaos in the country, the generation is unique in that they don't have a collective memory of America being united. They don't remember September 11th or 12th or 13th, for that matter. There's one thing that stands this generation apart from all generations since the greatest generation is things were divided. Thank you, George W. Bush. And they don't ever remember when it was united. The second thing they have is this ongoing period of disquiet in their lives from the Great Recession onward, COVID and all that sort of stuff. So by the time they're in middle and high school, they're dealing with younger people in their community suffering from depression, opioid abuse, being shot, and they're ready to vote on it. Once you turn 18, once you get the right to vote, they had a kind of whiplash between Obama and Trump where they could see the relevance of politics. All this was supercharged on February 14, 2018, when a shooter walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and shattered a community. And it was those students, two of whom are at Harvard now, who challenged themselves and their peers and the rest of America to stand up and organize and fight back. And so, he goes on about, how they are, in fact, voting, how there was no red wave, and the importance of how they feel on issues coming up. And so it's not all about, what Chris Rufo thinks.
I mean, interestingly, I was thinking about the age of the people involved, and then when Chris Rufo came up, Chris Rufo runs on, we have to run on the wokeness and school things, but how easily people move to the Chris Rufo issue set from, how easily parents move to that issue set from their COVID issue set of there shouldn't be masking and open to schools. But Gen Z are the first voters coming to the polls having been in school during those closures. And I will say, I don't know that many
growing
kids
up with lockdown and how to deal with a shooter.
Right.
I mean, that's part and parcel of who they are.
Exactly. And so they're dealing with emergencies in the schools all the time. But as far as the COVID thing goes, I don't run into a lot of kids. I mean, maybe it's just that their kids and school was closed, so who knows what their opinion of that is going to be like. But I don't know anybody that was like, yeah, they better open these damn things up pronto. I got to get my ass back in there immediately because disease is there waiting for me and I can't wait to catch it. And there's no vaccine and nobody knows what it does to kids. And they were pretty sure that, as difficult as it was to get through schooling with COVID, they were pretty properly scared by that disease and thought that was kind of the right thing to do, as weird as it was. And the rest of the voting public is pretty sure they're furious about not having been pushed into school during the middle of the peak of the COVID pandemic. And they're not, actually. And they were probably glad to be home and not at risk of being shot the whole time, too. That's on their minds as well. You might not understand what the kids are going through. I don't know.
Right. So it's really quite interesting. And, one of the things that annoys me to no end, I realize the Democratic Party is far from perfect and has a lot of work to do to really cover the issues that our listeners care about, for example. But two things that annoy me to no end. Number one, the accusation Democrats never fight back. That's ridiculous. Look at Wisconsin.
Like that.
And number two, the kids don't vote. They do.
Yes.
At least these kids vote. You're thinking of the last generation of kids. You
or
probably
mine,
still think
when
Gen
we were
X's
kids.
are kids. They're not kids anymore.
Yes, we have them. And some of them some Gen Xers have grandkids. So.
Right. And those kids, the Gen Zers, they vote.
Yes. All right. Well, good for the Gen Zers and the fact that they're doing that. And hang on, and eventually you will also discover that. Eventually, you'll find out that the secret is if you stay involved in politics long enough, your Gen Z leaders will disappoint you as much as the ones that you're disappointed in now, who are Gen X or older.
But at least you elected them.
Yes. So. And then eventually the really
as
hilarious
opposed to
part
being
will be
disappointed
that,
by people who you didn't bother to vote
Right.
for, and then you're mad at.
Yeah, so you'll have a different kind of disappointment. But then whatever comes after Gen Z, and we really have to figure out that Z is the end of the alphabet. I don't know what.
Not according to Dr. Seuss, it ain't.
Oh, okay. Well, there's that, and then we could start calling them Omicron, Delta, etc. Variants.
But we can do the double A's and the triple A's.
But when the next generation comes,
Generation
and
AA.
They're furious because of the things that are happening to them, either in school or elsewhere. They will, of course, let you know in the newspaper. You'll find out Gen Z, they're lazy and terrible and disengaged and sellouts. And that's the problem with these guys. And you have to let us, the alphas, whatever we decide to call them, take over. And be prepared for that. It happens to everybody. Don't feel bad about it when it does happen.
Right. I can imagine that. I'm the alpha generation.
Yeah. Oh, boy. We need something else.
That's exactly what we don't need.
And name our generations like hurricanes now.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is a piece from the Associated Press and of interest. Again, one of those things we don't talk about often enough. Report finds democracy for Black Americans is under attack. Well, duh, if you're a Black American, you know this, but not enough white people know it. Extreme views adopted by some local, state, and federal political leaders who try to limit what history can be taught in schools and seek to undermine how Black officials perform their jobs, Tennessee, are among the top threats to democracy for Black Americans, the National Urban League says. We've censorship and Black history suppression, and now this, talking about the Tennessee Three. Both Tennessee lawmakers were quickly reinstated by leaders in their districts. That is part and parcel of the whole story when you do that. They tried to throw them out. It didn't even work for like a week. And we're back at work in the House after an uproar that spread well beyond the state.
That was an amazing turn of events, and I didn't know anything about how you would fill those vacancies in Tennessee. But you would have thought that the Tennessee legislature knew how you fill vacancies in Tennessee.
They did, and they knew. And they, in fact, threatened the local councils and such with not getting funds if you went ahead and reappointed them. So they knew. Yes,
that's right. They did do that. Okay, good point. I'm glad that came up because I don't think we've mentioned that. But that's true.
But it was reported, certainly for Justin Pearson's county council.
Absolutely.
And they ignored it and go ahead. And probably that's one of the reasons why it was a unanimous show of force, which included Republicans, by the way.
Aha. Oh. Yeah, you would think it would have to.
Well, they don't like being threatened.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
So one of the most prominent areas in this report is so-called critical race theory. Scholars developed it as an academic framework during the 70s and 80s in response to what they viewed as a lack of racial progress. The theory centers on the idea that racism is systemic in the nation's institutions and that they function and maintain the dominance of white people in society. Now, as it turns out, it's funny reading that definition, the white supremacists disagree with that.
We're failures, is what they're saying. We haven't been able to maintain control at all.
We're verifying the theory by disagreeing with it.
Okay. Oh, you funny white supremacists.
Director Tafe Alexander says the forward tracking project, part of the UCLA Law School, began in response to the backlash that followed the protest of the George Floyd killing. She said the expanded scope of some of these laws, which are having a chilling effect on teaching certain aspects of the country's racial conflicts, will lead to major gaps in understanding history and social justice. The anti-CRT campaign is going to frustrate our ability to reach our full potential as a multiracial democracy, which, of course, is the point of it.
Yes.
Now, Florida has been the epicenter of many of the steps, including opposing advanced placement in African-American studies, but it's not alone. The things that have been happening in Florida have been replicated, or governors in similarly situated states have claimed they'll do the same thing. In Alabama, for example, a proposal to ban divisive concepts passed out of the legislative committee this past week. Last year, the administration of Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, rescinded a series of policies, memos, and other resources related to diversity, equity, and inclusion that are characterized as discriminatory and divisive in the state's public education system. So does that mean that if a Democrat is voted in, they get rescinded again?
Rescinded. No, I don't know. I suppose they would be reissued, though. Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Especially if they lose all those school board races.
Yeah.
Oklahoma public school teachers are prohibited from teaching certain concepts of race and racism under a bill Republican Governor Kevin Stitt signed into law in 2021. He just did something recently or said something recently that was like, yeah, I'm a racist. What are you going to do about it?
Oh.
I can't remember what it is. I'll find it for you. On Thursday, Llano County commissioners, if that's how it's pronounced, in Texas, held a special meeting to consider shutting down the entire public library system rather than follow a federal judge's order to return a slate of books to the shelves on topics ranging from teenage sexuality to bigotry. Now, isn't that how private schools got started in so many places in the country because of segregation?
Yeah, essentially, you're right. That's true.
So if
public
this,
resources shut down.
In context of this report, totally fits.
Yeah, and they're not the only place either. I think I just heard the same. I mean, it's happening in multiple states where they're saying we'd rather shut down our libraries than allow these radical publications to be included, which, we'd rather shut down our schools than segregate them is exactly the same move.
Right. So, again, that's the background behind, how a lot of this is happening. Mm-hmm. And here's sort of a parallel thing going on. Uche Blackstock points this out. This is in a tweet that was in the Pundit Roundup, which I'll give you so you have it. It's easier to find that way.
It is going to be bad.
A team of data analysts has found the presence of black primary care docs in a county, even a single person, means black residents in that county live longer.
Wow.
Even veteran researchers find the findings stunning, according to Stat News. And Uche Blackstock, who herself is a black physician, says these findings are so triggering not only because we already knew they're true because of our lived and professional experience, but because it's not an accident. The 1910 Flexner Report closed 5 HBCU medical schools, which would have educated more than 35,000 black physicians by 2019. Oh. A little piece of history you might otherwise not know. And then one of the final pieces I'll have before I sign off for today is a tweeter.
Flexner Report. I'll read that one. Okay, yes.
That was reorganizing medical schools into sort of a professional way back in 1910. Hugely important report, familiar to most doctors. But if you're a medical school administrator, you're intimately familiar with it.
I see.
Other than that, there were a bunch of trade schools, but that really organized it into, hey, why don't we teach science as part of this, I
mean, yeah, overall, I guess that sounded like a good idea. I don't know what's in the rest of it.
So this is a tweeter whose handle is at Political Kiwi, but describes himself as Rhonda Scrumptious, which is really kind of amusing. Says, this is...
I don't really know why that's funny. It just is.
Because Twitter's funny. I mean, it's one of the reasons I'm still on it. This is pretty striking, he says. County-level regression from Michigan suggests a highly significant effect on Gretchen Whitmer's, Big Gretch's performance from the abortion referendum, even after conditioning 2020 president and her 2018 performance. So the more likely you were to do well with the abortion referendum, the more likely you were to vote for Whitman.
All right.
And Peter Lemieux, who's a retired political scientist, who's a friend of mine on Twitter, says the only issue that moved the needle on generic ballot polling last year was Dobbs. That's it. Everything else is everybody's in their camp. Dobbs moved the needle because it brought Republicans over to the Democratic voting way. And so I think, again, this goes back to one of those other things that Republicans don't want to talk about, is the fact that abortion is such a big issue. And they really try to play it all sorts of ways to make it go away. It's not going away. They'd like to not talk about it. You have to talk about it. And even if you don't talk about it, you're still going to get killed at the ballot box, whether you talk about it or not. So not talking about it is a good way to, consign yourself to oblivion.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about that, said Tony Gonzalez from Texas. I want to talk about other issues that women care about.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay.
What, name one?
Like what?
Right. I mean, can
whatever
you do
it is,
it, Tony?
You can be on the wrong side of it,
Yeah.
but what do you want to talk about?
Okay. Right. Legitimate rape. Probably the next step. Sure.
Right.
Fantastic. You've done a great job on women's issues.
Now, just mention these two because they fit with our theme. This is a article from Paul Waldman and Greg Sargent in the Washington Post. A rural Texas county just blinked on library closures. Pressure worked.
Okay.
I think that was in Llanos County. In Llanos?
I believe so.
Llano County?
I don't know how they pronounce it. Is it a double L?
Double L.
I mean, because if they do it in Spanish, yeah, but who knows whether they do it in Texas?
Yeah.
Llanos.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's pronounced Houston.
Yeah. Well.
Just not to confuse it with the city. So there's that. And then Will Bunch talks about book banners in Pennsylvania losing. A right-wing move to keep a young adult climate change novel out of a Kurztown, Pennsylvania middle school backfired in spectacular fashion, he writes. So it's the day the book banners lost. So again, there's a lot of stuff going on at school level, but it's not all bad. In fact, in a lot of ways, the populace is aware of what's going on. They don't like it. And they're reacting to it.
All right. Yes. Well, good. I'm glad they're screwing this up incredibly.
Thank you, Glenn Youngkin. You brought it to our attention. Now that you did, you're going to lose.
Right. He squeaked by. I'm sure he's mopping his brow and glad that there's a one-term limit for governor in Virginia, and he doesn't have to prove, Well,
he still thinks it's a ticket to the presidency, just like Ron DeSantis thinks that 6-week ban on abortion in Florida is going to help him.
I guess.
They're both wrong. I
did see that, I have an article I think I put away somewhere in the last couple of days about, he may be shelving his presidential bid at some point.
He was planning on being Mike Pompeo's vice president, and you know how that worked out.
Yeah, all right.
Pompeo announced that he's not running.
Yes.
For personal reasons, which is to say he figured out he can't win.
I personally would never vote for him, so we're in sync on that.
Yeah, or as they say on Twitter, it made his follower really angry.
All right, we'll see you Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And yes, I am. I looked up in the break about the county in Texas, and as expected, Texans mangle the double L. They're not saying Llano because that would be too Mexican. So they say Llano, and there you have it. They don't know. They don't know what they're looking at, but that's what they do. And I figured as much. Not that the rest of the country is any better at not mangling Spanish, but the general rule is if it's happening here, mispronounce it. So. Okay, and yeah, I put a lot of those articles aside that Greg mentioned that I thought might make interesting, fuller reading, but maybe we can go to the one that was mentioned in the Paul Waldman and Greg Sargent article. I think they made mention of it, but they were pointing out, right, so that where the book banners were running into opposition and finally being overwhelmed, and there was, I think, reference to, or at least Greg made reference to, the, let's see if I can read it in pocket version, the Will Bunch article in Philly Inquirer, the day the book banners lost in Pennsylvania's culture wars. And I thought I might read through that, because it's always wise when you get an article by certain writers that lands on your desk to give a look to it, especially if it's on a hot issue of the moment. And, Greg updates us that over in Delaware, Federal Judge Eric Davis just took the bench, and he's a federal judge, isn't he? And confirmed the one-day delay in Dominion versus Fox News defamation trial. Davis says it was his decision. This is not unusual. No mention or intimation of settlement talks. Jury selection resumes Tuesday night at 9 a.m. And I guess that's Scott. Is that Scott McFarlane tweeting that news? Yes. Okay. Here's the link to his tweet about it, and it is at the Bird site itself. So tweet is the right term for it. Back over to Pennsylvania and its losses, which is our gain and Pennsylvania's gain in the book banning fights. I guess I was thinking, though, one thing I mentioned to Greg during the break that I thought it might bear some discussion for us here, where he was asking, so if you reverse school board policies where Glenn Youngkin is rescinding school board policies once he becomes governor in ways that set back our efforts at educating along the lines of diversity and inclusion ideas into the curriculum, and if he is replaced by a Democratic governor, and again he's term limited, so anything could happen, right? If there's a backlash against that, are you rescinding it? Are you rescinding? What exactly are you doing? What's the point? And it actually got to a larger point of, I was reminded at that point of how often when, say, we're involved in discussions of the filibuster and the need to reform / eliminate the filibuster in the Senate, and conservatives at that point will tell you, oh, no, you can't have that because it requires bipartisanship and compromise, and you get more stable, long-lasting body of law out of it because there has to be this broad agreement in order to get it passed in the first place. And we can't be just doing majority rules all the time, because every time the majority in Congress switches, you'll be rescinding and rescinding and rescinding all of the previous laws. And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how majority rule works, and that does happen. But sometimes you could, if you decide that that's bad for America, you could not do it. But of course, Republicans can't not do it. Is that the right number of negatives? But you see, in other words, what it gets around to is they say that's the worst thing in the world and the worst thing for democracy and stability. But when they win the majority, what do they do with it? We have the Dobbs case. We're going to overrule Roe v. Wade. We're going to rescind these orders in Virginia. We're going to ban books. The books were published. They're already here. We're going to take them out of the library. And if you don't, we're going to rescind all the funding for the library as well. And we're going to get rid of this law and that law and this diversity and inclusion. And they rescind. There's nothing else going on in these Republican legislatures. But they just swore that was the worst thing ever because they needed to swear that in order to win the argument for the day on the filibuster. And unfortunately, they've also convinced idiots like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema that one, that they're worthy of listening to on these things, and two, that they're right in holding this stupid idea that the people who fed it to them don't even believe. Anyway, I just thought I'd make that point before diving back into the very exciting sounding day the book banners lost in Pennsylvania's culture wars. Will Bunch, again, writing the byline or the dateline here, it won't be Philadelphia. The book banners probably lost their bid in the culture wars in Philadelphia a long time ago. So this time, out to the country. Kutztown. And it begins this way. If you ban it, they will come. Who are we talking about? Let's find out. For the better part of an hour on Saturday, dozens of teenagers and their parents snaked around the towering stacks of tomes inside Kutztown's Firefly Books, and sometimes spilled onto the sidewalks of this quaint Berks County college town, most of them clutching the book that conservatives on the local school board didn't want them to read. Good job, dummies. Calliope Price, 14, and in the 8th grade, came out to meet Alan Gratz, Gratz, the author of the banned, quote-unquote banned, young adult novel about climate change. 2 Degrees. That's the name of the book. And that's what they're now banning. Oh, my God. He is talking to kids about climate change. He's sexualizing them about climate. I mean, whatever. And he's a vampire and a pedophile as well. So sure. Anyway, after hearing about, she came out to meet the author after hearing about the controversy and realizing that Gratz, wish I had figured this out ahead of time. Gratz, let's say, had also written her favorite book. So naturally she was going to come out and see what else he had to offer. What was her favorite book? It is called, ironically, Ban This Book. It is ironic, both that he would call it Ban This Book and that they would ban the other one. So they can't even follow simple instructions. It's not good. Holding her now signed copy, she weighed in on Kutztown Area Middle School canceling its annual One School, One Book program amid conservative complaints that a climate book would somehow scare or indoctrinate adolescents. I think it's really stupid. And I think that does sound pretty stupid. I think I'm going to click over. What is One School, One Book program? I don't know, and I won't know because I've reached my limit of premium content at the Philadelphia Inquirer, which I guess I probably should be subscribing to because Will Bunch is pretty good. Anyway, at the moment, I'm taking a freebie on this one. Now, let's see. Where were we? Oh, yes, right. So Calliope Price is our 14-year-old who said, I think it's really stupid. I think she's right, and so does Will here. Price has a good point. Right-wingers who thought they'd scored a victory by canceling the middle school program only ensured that more young folks in Berks County would actually read 2 Degrees. It's a tale of teens dramatically fighting catastrophes brought on by climate change. So, it's a little bit of a young adult adventure where you, through the protagonist, maybe, get to be Greta Thunberg in a way. So, and I mean, she's the role model for all this, and she's nearly their age, and kids are interested in it. And it's not sexual content. What's the problem? But they don't want people talking about global warming or climate change because they lose on that politically, so they're going to ban that. Just a political idea. And yes, not only was it stupid, and not only does it mean that they'll read 2 Degrees, it also means, 14. She's going to be registered to vote in 4 years. That's not that far away. They'll have a presidential election in between then. And, we'll have to deal with Trump again, I guess, at least as a candidate. But these kids are going to vote, and they're going to come up, all the indication is that they are voting, and once they become eligible. And so I imagine that trend will continue. And the first thing they'll have in mind is how stupid these idiots were interfering in their lives. I mean, it used to be, I guess you could count on the fact that most of the kids wouldn't vote, but it was mostly because politics didn't interfere in the daily life of teenagers in the same way that they're now doing on a pretty consistent basis. These kids are going to, I think, grow up where they can't wait to vote and have somebody get punished for trying to screw with their lives, as opposed to kids, who graduated from high school when I did or slightly after, where it was like, the federal deficit. Ooh, yikes, so scary, and it doesn't really make any serious. Yeah, they would try to argue, well, it has an impact downstream because then they're cutting the budgets for you. And it's true. It did have an impact on school budgets, obviously, but, not in the same way as yanking the books out of children's hands. Like taking candy from a baby. Now it's like taking books from adolescents. And guess what? It's easy to do, but the kids don't like it. And the kids grow older and register to vote and have their whole lives ahead of them. And you grow older and are actually in decline and getting replaced. You will not replace us? Yes, they will. That's the whole design of reproduction and everything. Remember, you're pro-family and you don't want any abortions? All these kids are going to come up and replace you. So, I don't know. Anyway, this is your own fault for not thinking this through. Now, back to Will Bunch, who has thought everything through. Let's see. Right. So right-wingers who thought they'd scored a victory by canceling this program actually It had the impact of getting more kids in Berks County to read this book, 2 Degrees. They were helped by the progressive grassroots organization Red Wine and Blue, which raised money to buy 200 copies to give away to Kutztown youth. That's nice, Red Wine and Blue, and I guess they get together and drink wine and talk about politics and raise money. Good. Gratz, who long planned to come to Kutztown University for its annual conference on children's literature, arranged to hold both afternoon and evening book signings to meet as many young fans as possible. So, yeah, you can run for state representative there now, except he's probably not from in town. Anyway, Saturday was the day that the book banners lost in Kutztown, a somewhat liberal-leaning borough surrounded by a political red sea of Trump voters, yes, where the left and the right are currently duking it out for control of the Kutztown area school board. And it couldn't have come at a better time, when it seems that the culture warriors of the extreme right are waging war against not just books, but freedom of thought from coast to coast. In Missouri, State House members took the radical step of cutting all state dollars for its 160 public libraries. It's not just Llanos County, Texas, but in fact the state of Missouri doing the same thing, cutting all dollars for all of its 160 public libraries in a fit of pique over a lawsuit from the ACLU, which is challenging a state law forcing libraries in the Show Me state to yank some 300 books over allegations that they are sexually explicit. And that definitely warrants a dramatic music intervention. In Texas, Llano County officials backed down from their threat to shut down its library system after a judge ordered that 17 books be returned to the shelves. Why? They can't have flip-flop, rescinding policy over and over again, except we actually do that all the time. The legislature will pass a law, the law will be invalidated by the courts, but that's the good kind of rescinding. Anyway, let's see. So returning 17 books to the shelves, but battles around titles dealing with race, sexuality, and other topics are still raging in many jurisdictions, especially in politically riven communities like Kutztown. Now, a top author like Tennessee-based Gratz, Tennessee, who has steadily climbed toward the top of the young adult bestseller list with his 19 books, all on, I guess, or at least many of them on hot-button subjects such as refugees, the Holocaust, and terrorism. In other words, speaking to young people where they live about the things that they need to know in order to be informed adults as they grow. An approach that he calls social thrillers is finding himself on the front lines of a war that no one expected to see in America. The reason I'm writing these books is because kids are asking me to write about these topics, Gratz told me. We always want to say we're trying to protect children by keeping these kinds of things from them, but honestly, the world is coming at kids faster than before. They're getting shot, before you. The kids have been going through active shooter drills since kindergarten and have also been exposed to debates over tough issues like racism at a young age. The world is coming at them, he said, and I hope that books like mine can give them a way of seeing what's happening in the world without having to experience it just yet. It's actually kind of a wise approach, don't you think? That was certainly the thinking behind his latest 2 Degrees, in which everyday teens cope with events such as floods and wildfires in a near future when the world's temperature has risen 2 degrees due to greenhouse gas pollution. The implied message of a call to action around climate change and Gratz's long-planned appearance at the local university had inspired Kutztown Area Middle School to pick 2 Degrees for its annual One Book, One School school-wide reading program. I figured that might be what the actual thing was. Everybody in school will read this book and then talk about it in your various grades and in each class. The books had already arrived when several conservative board members and parents leaned on the school board to cancel the program. Waste the money, they screamed. According to the Reading Eagle, one adult complained at a board meeting that a book about climate change might make kids feel guilty and then turn against their parents. That's the real problem, of course. And Greta says you probably should, by the way, but, and she's probably right about that. But yeah, I love this new, I guess the new motive for these book banners is that we don't want things that'll make kids feel guilty. If you talk about racism, it'll make white kids feel guilty. Well, no, it won't. But, but it will make them maybe turn against their parents, right? Because they're not guilty of the racism, but the people who have come before apparently are. I'm just reading the history of your being racist. So, anyway. The backlash was hardly unique, either nationally or in Pennsylvania, where several suburban districts have seen bitter clashes over what's in school libraries, or even in Kutztown, where school officials did retain the controversial book Gender Queer, but with a parental consent form, after a lengthy public debate. But the controversies in this college town, about 65 miles northwest of Philadelphia, have brought pushback in favor of free expression. The 2022 fight over genderqueer inspired local teen Jocelyn Diffenbaugh, I'm guessing at the pronunciation, doing the best I can here, and now a 9th grader, Jocelyn, to launch the Kutztown Teen Banned Book Club, which garnered her a National Free Speech Award. Okay, good for applying to colleges with. Diffenbaugh and a couple of her girlfriends were among the first online Saturday, and club members returned in the evening for a discussion panel with Gratz. I think it's amazing that we have such a well-known author in our tiny town, and I think it's amazing that we were able to get these books out to all the people who are here, because that opportunity was unjustly taken away from kids in the middle school, Diffenbaugh told me. She said the students weren't just supposed to get a free book, but to have a conversation. And having conversations about books are so influential and helpful in education. But right-wingers who thought they had banned a climate change book in Kutztown only made it more popular. Middle schoolers not only were allowed access to 2 degrees from the boxes that school officials had already opened before the one book, one school cancellation, but many enjoyed the 200 free copies doled out by Red Wine and Blue. What's more, academic free speech is now the number one issue in a heated May 16th election that will determine the future direction of the Kutztown Area School Board. Are you in the Kutztown area? May 16th election. The number one issue. I like it. 4 of the 5 candidates are from a group called Coffee, maybe? K-O-F-E-E. Kutztown Organized for Educational Excellence, running on an open books, open mind platform. And they were at the bookstore on Saturday to show their support for Gratz and his teen readers. It's just outrageous, one of those Coffee candidates, Charles Brown, easy to remember, vote for Charlie Brown, right, told me of the district's back down on 2 degrees, one of the reasons he decided to run. It's not like a book, How to Make a Bomb or anything, to think that it's propaganda. To me, the issue is that kids have to learn the difference between fact and fiction and how to judge something they read, not ban books. Not surprisingly, Brown's slate is facing spirited opposition from a Republican ticket, the Concerned Citizens of KASD, I guess that's probably the Kutztown Area School District, whose platform calls for banning what it calls critical race theory. Sure, right. As well as diversity programs in the Kutztown schools, and which has been showing up at board meetings with signs like, "We do not co-parent with the government." Well, good. We don't co-parent with other parents either, so get out of my effing face and let me vote how I want to raise the kids here. Shut the hell up. But the concerned citizens, that's always a good sign. Now, you almost never want to side with whoever says we're concerned citizens. Anyway, the battle is now joined. What happened this weekend in Kutztown shines a bright light on one of the most encouraging political trends of 2023, in which a radical minority of extremist book banners has awakened a sleeping giant. The vast, no longer silent majority who still believes that absurd restrictions on exposing our young people to ideas are un-American. that the Llano County, Texas flap, officials ultimately backed down from their threat to close the library because of public pressure and national publicity. Elsewhere in Pennsylvania, over 150 kids at, Perkiomen, I have no idea. Perkiomen. Perkiomen, maybe? Valley High School? Oh boy, you want to look it up? Carrying signs like Teach Children the Truth, that sounds like a good idea, walked out of school to protest proposed book restrictions that are currently on hold. The bad news might be this: it can't happen here reality that America is even debating these restrictions on free speech in the 2020s. But the great news is that the book banners are often failing. And more voters need to know that your child's freedom to read a book and to learn is on the ballot in 2023 and especially in 2024. Absolutely. It's a victory because it's the people in the community who stood up and said, we're not going to let a few people speak for them, Gratz told me after signing dozens of books on Saturday. I think that's what's happening around the country. I think that what's happening around the country is that a few loud people are making a stink and getting school boards and superintendents to back down because they don't want the trouble. And I think a lot of people are standing up and making good trouble. All right. That's the kind you're supposed to be making. So I just thought I would share that story with you because it's important. One, that it's happening, and two, that it is already happening elsewhere in other towns. And if it's necessary in your town and you hear this story and you say, yeah, I can actually become part of a national movement to oppose this, maybe you'll go ahead and do it. And then who knows, often awesome things ensue. So by all means, think it through. Give it a shot. All right. Let's see. Other things to share with you, and there are many, and we're kind of behind. There's the Texas story, though. Oh, yes. Right. Why not throw at least this headline out there, just since we've been talking about it and thinking about the way Ron DeSantis has sort of taken what he thinks is the lessons from Youngkin's victory here in Virginia and double, triple, quadruple down on it, et cetera, et cetera. And, here's the pronunciation. Perkiomen Valley Middle School. Is that what we were talking about out in Pennsylvania? I don't know. And I don't remember what I said. So, but thanks again, for the pronunciation notes. Mom's listening closely today. All right, remote production staff. Anyway, so like we were saying, DeSantis has decided that the lesson from Virginia is take that and put it on steroids and run on that. And that way, something. So I'm not certain what to attribute this to. It could be that Youngkin sees that he's simply going to be outflanked on all of this stuff by DeSantis. Or is he getting some hint that maybe this stuff isn't as solid and workable as I thought, and so much the better that DeSantis has committed himself to it? I think it's actually the former, perhaps. But we're luckily finding out that the draw of this weird extremist anti-schools, anti-kids platform isn't all that powerful around the country, which is, where you have to win your votes if you want to become president. But there is this news. Youngkin gives 2024 presidential run the cold shoulder, which is a New York Times headline, which is, I think, a weird headline for conveying the fact that it looks like Youngkin is backing away from the idea of running for president. Not that I'm too cool to run for president and giving it the cold shoulder, which is, I guess, that's the implication when I read giving it the cold shoulder. Like that's an intentional act. It's more like the presidential race is giving Youngkin the cold shoulder. He can't get any traction. He's like literally at zero in every poll, and he can't figure it out. I'm the grandfather of all of this anti-CRT. He thinks it was his thing and his doing. It wasn't. It was borrowed from Chris Rufo, and they never apparently understood it in the first place. And it was fueled by something completely different than they thought it was fueled by. And then, of course, the place that they chose to pitch the battle was never going to buy Republican line on this and voted overwhelmingly Democratic, but that's just between you and me. I keep telling you that that's the case. The rest of the country still has the wrong idea, I think, largely about Loudoun County. Anyway, so what's happening here? How's the New York Times incorrectly describing things? Glenn Youngkin was seen as a promising candidate after he was elected governor of Virginia, a Democratic-leaning state. That's true. But he appears to be putting national aspirations on hold, which I think is upside down and backwards. I think national aspirations, national politics are putting a hold on Youngkin. They're just saying, we're just not interested in what you have to offer. But let's see. Trip Gabriel is the writer of this piece. Maybe I'll skim it a little bit in the break that is coming right up and see whether it's worth going through the whole thing or just it's enough to just say, I don't get that headline. That doesn't strike me as correct. Well, let's see. Virginia's governor is putting the presidential hoopla on ice, he says. Youngkin, the Republican whose surprising election in the blue trending state set off instant talk of a presidential run, and he's now tapped on the brakes of 2024, telling advisors and donors that his sole focus is on Virginia's legislative elections in the fall. How nice.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, where we have another update on the pronunciation of the weird location in Pennsylvania. I guess that we've decided that's not it. It's not Perkiomen, it's Perkiomen. Okay, well, there you go. Perkiomen Valley. I guess that makes, I don't know. It doesn't make any more or less sense, I suppose. And again, I guess if I cared about it, I would go. But it's not that I don't care about Perkiomen Valley. It's just, if I cared about the pronunciation that much, I could go back later. I'm kind of interested in how many different ways did I pronounce it without any guidance, and were any of them close to the actual one? I guess if you live in the area, you can feel free to say, yeah, you got it right or wrong the first time or whatever, or it's named after. You want to tell me a story about it? Fantastic. Got any mnemonic devices that can help in case we ever encounter this name again? By all means, send them on over. All right. Let's see. I took a quick look, but not that much, at what Trip Gabriel was saying here. Maybe it's worth a quick run through at least some of his thinking here, because it helps justify a little bit the titling of this thing. Once you get down into the reporting a little bit. So, Youngkin, of course, the Republican who's surprising election in a blue trending state, right? Okay, he knows how to win. He knows a Republican who knows how to win in a blue trending state. So therefore, he'll be a great, candidate for president, which doesn't always translate, but it's an argument. Now, Youngkin says, well, I don't know about this whole presidential thing. I'm just going to be focused on legislative elections here in Virginia in the fall, which is what they all say. I'm not thinking about running for president. I got work to do. My first, priority is the people of blank, whatever state we live in. And it's a thing you say. Now, A little bit more to it. Youngkin hopes to flip the state legislature to a Republican majority, and that could earn him a closer look from rank-and-file Republicans across the country, who so far have been indifferent to the presidential chatter surrounding him in the news media, and among heavyweight donors that he would need to keep pace alongside more prominent candidates. He has yet to crack 1% in polls about the presidential a potential Republican field. So, yeah, that's pretty bad. And he should have a big pile of cash from his fantastic business career that he could use to crack 2%, say. But, apparently he's not interested in using it. That's so weird. Anyway, yeah, and that would be a story, right? If he knows how to win as a Republican in a blue trending state, well, you have another chance to prove it. We saw you win this one. Now, if you could flip the legislature to Republican, other people might believe that you actually have this ability. Anyway, but backing away now, for now anyway, is also a bow to political reality. Youngkin has a shortage of clean conservative victories in the divided Virginia legislature compared with, say, Ron DeSantis of Florida, who stole much of Youngkin's thunder on parents' rights issues in education. That's in closing quotes, parents' rights. And that does stand to reason. Not only was it just because he was going to take them even further and just take them to extremes, but he could force a Republican legislature there in Florida to actually turn that into law. Whereas here in Virginia, they were like, no, I don't think that's right, and we're going to oppose you, and you're kind of dumb, and we don't like you very much. So that's why DeSantis has been able to run. Not only shamelessness has enabled DeSantis to run away with things, but having a pliant Republican legislature has helped him a great deal as well. Let's see. An effort by Youngkin last year to raise his profile by campaigning for Republicans around the country fizzled when most proved too extreme for voters and lost their races. And then, of course, back here in Virginia, we heard all about that. Youngkin, the Mr. Moderate in the nice fleece vest, is out there for all of their crazy-ass legitimate rape-style candidates. And maybe he's actually a dangerous conservative ideologue after all. And if he's not, then he's just dumb. So, take your pick. Anyway, tellingly, Youngkin's two top political advisors who guided his gubernatorial victory and were mapping out a 2024 strategy both took jobs this month with a super PAC that supports the presidential candidacy of DeSantis. How do you like that? Plus, Chris Rufo got stolen away as well, even though he also is not from Virginia. Asked about his presidential decision timeline this week, Youngkin said, listen, I didn't write a book, and I'm not in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina. Instead, he said he is putting his full focus on November's statewide Virginia election, when all 140 seats in both chambers of the General Assembly are on the ballot. The decision to enter the 2024 campaign in November would be historically late, well past the first Republican debate in August. I am wholly focused on the Commonwealth of Virginia, so he goes on to claim that for a paragraph or so. His political fundraising committee announced last week that they had collected $2.75 million in the first 3 months of the year, surpassing the best quarterly results of any prior Virginia governor and providing a war chest that could help Republicans in local races. So, okay. Success, however, is far from assured. Virginia Democrats plan to campaign heavily on Mr. Youngkin's unsuccessful push for a 15-week abortion ban, an issue that has mobilized voters in state after state since the reversal of Roe v. Wade. So, okay, he's going to have to talk about abortion and answer for it. There is no amount of money that is going to overcome the regressive policies that Glenn Youngkin and the MAGA Republicans have been trying to impose on Virginia, said Susan Swecker, the chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Virginia. There's no amount of money that is going to overcome the regressive policies. You mean his money? Because our amount of money, we hope, will overcome it. Isn't that right? That's weird. Okay. She predicted that suburban voters who favored Mr. Youngkin in 2021 would broadly reject Republicans after the Supreme Court ended the national right to abortion last year and as conservatives press for national restrictions, most recently through a federal judge in Texas, you know that story, who revoked the 23-year-old approval of a common abortion pill. They didn't even try to make me pronounce it in this one, but I think I now have that. Anyway, so you get the idea. That's, I don't know if I really care to hear from his strategists about it, and it'll take us a long time to get through. But anyway, I guess you can, it somewhat mitigates the weirdness of the headline and gives you an idea of what's going on. I got a couple other things to get to, and maybe I can address some of the things people sent along. I have an email here from longtime listener John Ronald, who says, very nice of you to say, who did a great job explaining why Dianne Feinstein agreeing to step down from judiciary runs into the potential hurdle of a filibuster on the resolution necessary to name a replacement. Did they run into the same roadblock if Feinstein simply resigned from the Senate entirely so that Gavin Newsom can appoint another Democrat for that Senate seat in California? Or what if she, goodness forbid, catches COVID and expires in office? Wouldn't there still need to be a Senate resolution to reconstitute the Senate Judiciary Committee in either case? Yes, there would be. I wish I could share Greg's optimism, but I think your more cynical take is the correct one. Why wouldn't the GOP sabotage Dems' attempts to rebalance the judicial appointments? It seems like straight power politics to me, so of course McConnell and other Senate GOP-ers would obstruct just like they did for Merrick Garland. And Joe Manchin and Sinema are utterly unreliable when it comes to dismantling the filibuster in any form, because it would mean voluntarily giving up their own power as swing votes for hire. Anyway, just hoping you could address my hypotheticals above, and we can do that. And I mean, we've kind of done that. But I'll turn back and go to it for another minute or so. But if they'd face this dilemma regardless, then I suppose I can't blame Feinstein for wanting to hang on and recover from her bout with shingles. Yes, it's delaying important committee business, but that business would be delayed either way, it seems. It's just really unlucky break for the Dems. I think she should retire early for myriad other reasons, but I suppose I should just be grateful she's not running for re-election after her current term ends. All right. Well, that's largely the case. Appointing a new member to committees, it's one of those things that, I mean, it gets overlooked because it's usually routine. And because it's usually routine, there's some chance, and I mean, I think Greg was right to point out that there's some chance sometimes the Republicans in the Senate do pick their battles, particularly if they are in the mood to listen to Mitch McConnell. He will sometimes say, we don't gain a whole lot by preventing this, but it's possible, too, that inside of the Republican conference, the argument goes the other way. You know, we do gain something from this. I mean, ordinarily we just piss off Democrats and we might be able to block legislation, but it's usually stuff that people aren't paying any attention to. People want to get appointed to the, agriculture committee and the small business committee or whatever. And, do we really want to stand in the way of these appointments? It doesn't make a great deal of difference. But on judiciary, there are some real high profile stakes involved, and it's possible that McConnell may come to this conclusion on his own, or he may be pushed to it by his conference, that, there's a real material benefit to preventing anybody new from getting put on the Judiciary Committee, even though everybody kind of supposedly, quote unquote, knows, and the norms of Senate operation are, look, the Democrats it's a narrow majority, but they're in the majority. They won the right to organize the Senate. We don't really stand in the way of that. And it's not like they're taking away our fair share of power by adding, or having the correct number, the correct ratio on the committee. But they, but hardball politics might just overcome that and say, it doesn't matter that it's their fair share. What's fair is the number of seats that they can wrest from our control, and we're not going to let them wrest this one from our control. So it's entirely possible. Yeah, and I guess that's a way of thinking about it too, right? I hadn't really considered from Feinstein's point of view. Look, you're not going to be able to replace me anyway, so what's the difference? Even if it's an ego thing that I want to hang on to the end of my term, you're not going to be able to replace me with anybody who is effective, so why not just let me do this thing? And I guess my response to that would probably be, well, I'll tell you what. If you hang on because we wouldn't get that seat anyway, then we head into the next election with people saying that they resent you. Because, you might not be able to convince them that, that seat, access to that seat is going to be blocked anyway, even though I've done a great job explaining how that could be the case, let's say. But, I think the general public perception of this is, oh my God, she's just hanging on for ego reasons. She wouldn't leave. We got to get this job, and there's been calls for a resignation so we can get some appointments done. I can't believe it. Whereas if you were to, she did step down or say she wanted to step down from the Judiciary Committee. So we might get this situation anyway. But now it requires Democrats to put a name forward and to see whether Republicans actually do block it. But I think it clarifies the situation if she's resigned from office. Like, I don't know if it's going to sink in that she just wants to make a midterm swap for her seat on the Judiciary Committee is going to make a lot of people say, look, if she's stepping down from the Judiciary Committee because she can't handle that job, then she can't handle the job. She should just resign. I think it makes it a much clearer issue. And then if the person named to fill her seat, whether as a caretaker or not, then can't get their appointments to the committee or the committees of their choice, or for that matter, a replacement, somebody else steps into the Judiciary Committee role and not Feinstein's replacement. Although I think that would probably be, I don't know. Well, it depends on who the person is, I guess. But if there's a resignation and then no reconfiguring of the committees is permitted because of a Republican filibuster, I think that sinks in with the public, as opposed to, so Republicans wouldn't cooperate because she did like sort of the convenient thing as opposed to the necessary thing. I don't know. I think the Republican filibuster hits different with the public if Feinstein's resigned, particularly if it's due to health reasons, and everybody feels bad about that and feels sympathetic. But then the idea of, I'm just going to sort of take a half measure. Then Republicans are only going to go halfway towards accommodating your next request. And people won't, I don't know if people will feel quite as angry about their blocking it at that point then. All right, let's see. What other things did I have put away here? Was there something, I think there was something that Scott had sent, and now I didn't mark which one it was that he had sent, and now I can't remember whether he did it in email or by text, and I think it might have been by text, and so I guess I better check there. And I can't, unfortunately now I can't even remember what it was. No, it must have been in email. Yeah, now that I think about it. Here we go. All right. I've got it. Oh, yes, right. A New York Times story. It's just sort of an interesting process story. Is it in Pocket? I feel like it's. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, the weird headline. That's the reason I couldn't identify it. But a report by Mark Scheffler in the New York Times on the strange process, perhaps question, not legislative process, but news management process. How did the Times, the New York Times, identify the suspect at the center of the Pentagon leak before the authorities announced his name? That's the inquiry here. And it probably, I don't know, I'm not certain how difficult it was, but it sounded like they were pretty much on the verge of getting his name anyway. They in the Washington Post were interviewing kids who were part of his inner circle on Discord and who did know his name, but at first were declining to provide it. And let's see, what makes this story so interesting? I'll take Scott's word for it here. It's an intriguing prospect. What's going on here? Begins with a section entitled A Circling Plane. Even before U.S. officials, this is in italics, sort of an introductory material here, even before U.S. officials announced Jack Teixeira, I guess is his the pronunciation of the name, as a suspect on Friday in the leaking of classified intelligence documents, my colleagues, that is to say Mark Scheffler's colleagues at the New York Times, on the visual investigations team, had learned of Teixeira's identity. I asked Mark Scheffler, this is coming from David Landhart. That's why it's in italics. I asked Mark Scheffler, the editor of the team, to share the fascinating backstory with you today. So David says it's fascinating. We believe that it might be. The murky digital trail started with 4 items posed to Russian channels on the messaging app Telegram, each consisting of a photograph of a classified U.S. intelligence report. Eric Toller, a freelance reporter who works with us, noticed that several similar documents had also been posted elsewhere and figured that the original source of the leaks had to be somewhere other than Telegram, but he couldn't find it. I looked and looked, Eric said. Then a tip came in. Somebody messaged him saying that similar material had appeared on the chat app Discord in a channel dedicated to maps for the video game Minecraft. Eric found 10 documents there and contacted the host. The host insisted that he was not the leaker and sounded terrified. Like a lot of people that Eric encountered during the search, the host almost seemed to be a teenager. I guess he was. He explained that he had gotten the documents from a chat group called Wow Mao on Discord. We heard about that one. There, a user named Luca with 2 C's, Luca or Lucha, perhaps, I guess if you really use the double C pronunciation, had posted more than 100 images of leaked documents. Eric then started live tweeting his research process, and people sent him private messages. He eventually learned that Luca was part of another chat group called Thug Shaker Central. That's the one, where hundreds of documents seemed to have been uploaded. But Thug Shaker Central had vanished, deleted by its users when the leaks became public. At this point, a former member of Thug Shaker with the username Vakhi, V-A-K-H-I, contacted Eric. Luca was not the original leaker, said Vakhi, who is 17 years old. Somebody known as OG was. Next up, the Granite Clue. 2 other visual investigations reporters, Christian Trebert and Malachi Brown, joined the efforts at this point. Working with Eric, they heard from Vakhi that OG had started posting the documents to Thug Shaker last fall. OG worked at a military facility, Vakhi said, and the 2 of them had played video games together. The search was on for OG. Thug Shaker was gone, and his fellow gamers refused to identify OG, but we had enough information to home in on who he might be, Malachi said. We looked at the games he played online, who he played them with, and connected those dots. On Steam, an app that sells video games and where users connect with other players, the reporters looked for Vakhi's account and for the people to whom he was linked. Eric used a specialized site that scrapes and indexes Steam user data, allowing him to see usernames that were associated with Vakhi and his contacts. The team figured that one of the people who had interacted with Vakhi might have been OG. The reporters found such a person with the original username of Jack DJ Tex, T-E-X, on the, which is, of course, similar to the beginning of the spelling of his last name. On the account, they found a screenshot from a video game identifying a player as Jack Teixeira. The reporters then scoured Flickr, Instagram, and other parts of the web for this mystery person. They found one photo of a Jack Teixeira in a military uniform, another of him smiling in the woods, and another of him in the kitchen of his childhood home, standing near a brown and white speckled granite countertop. Granite countertops always do you in. On Wednesday, Christian and Malachi spoke to another Discord member who had downloaded a new trove of 27 photographs of leaked documents. In some of them, Christian and other members of our team, Riley Mellon, another member rather, noticed that the surface on which the documents were sitting when they were photographed was a brown and white kitchen countertop. On Thursday, Haley Willis, another member of the team, and two colleagues arrived before dawn at the Teixeira home in North Dighton, Dighton, what is North Dighton, maybe, Massachusetts. We saw who we believe might have been Jack driving into the driveway, she said. He saw us, and we saw him, and his car froze for a second in the driveway. They approached the house. Jack's stepfather, Thomas Dufault, that's how it's spelled, Dufault, but maybe Dufault, a retired Air Force Master Sergeant, was there. Wow. Haley asked him if she could speak to Jack. He's not going to communicate with anybody except an attorney at this point, wisely, the stepfather said. Soon, a plane circled overhead. It was clear the authorities were already on to him. Back in New York, we published our investigation. Later that morning, a SWAT team arrived at the house in Massachusetts. Yeah, you can leave your digital fingerprints behind almost anywhere. And, if you start leaving digital fingerprints before you decide, I'm going to do some major criming, well, then it's too late. And the lesson really is, when you get to the point where you're thinking about doing some major criming, don't do it. And certainly don't do it online. But, okay. Well, that is kind of a bit of a fascinating story about how it's always interesting to see how the sleuthing gets done and people get caught. I did have a couple of other pieces about the leaker that I certainly don't have time to read them now, but I want to throw into the mix of how weird the whole thing is, where I was commenting on, Thursday, Friday, about how, essentially this guy had been grooming a bunch of teenagers to think he was like Mr. Awesome and all this, and how odd that was, and how odd that terminology didn't come up anywhere in any of the discussion, because that's pretty clearly what was going on. But one other weird piece of information that came out of that was, if you're wondering about, well, what is this Thug Shaker Central thing? What the hell does that mean? I don't know. And I don't care, but I did find out, I would care to the extent that it tells us anything about what's really going on and what, give us any clue into the psychological profile of either the kid at the center of it or the kids at the fringes of it. Apparently, just for fun, we'll throw out there that apparently Thug Shaker, I don't know in what context, I got no idea. This part I don't want to know about. But apparently a broadly popular, maybe outside of gay circles, but a gay porn meme of some kind. Don't know. And, I don't know. I don't know if there's probably no way to explain it without just getting way too involved in the details of it. But once again, weirdly, manly man kind of guy who doesn't want anything to, I'm conservative and probably anti-gay and anti-trans, just happens to name his, server after a gay porn meme. So, as others have said, the conservatives who claim to be anti-gay spend so much more time thinking about gay memes than gay anything than actual gay people do. It's a little telling, and I don't know. Just, it's not worth much, but it's out there and it's part of the story. Okay. Let's see. Just a few more minutes left, so we can't get that far into anything else. But, I don't know, a few additional items to throw out there. I do see a report from The Hill on the leaker that says that this, and I guess he's only an alleged leaker at this point, is being charged under the Espionage Act. So It is what it is. It's quite clearly, I think, a violation of the Espionage Act. And that means it's espionage, and that means he's a spy. And, although he claims not to have had a client state that he was spying for, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. He's done the damage that he's done, and he was foolish to have tried it. Okay, let's see. Some other things we can get to tomorrow. Some exciting news about how Trump's lawsuit against Michael Cohen could backfire. And I think it's standard stuff, of course, opening himself up to discovery. We've learned that along the way. Trump has taught a lot of people about the value of discovery and how you don't want to get involved in a frivolous lawsuit that isn't going to go anywhere, because you will get yourself embroiled in discovery, and they will discover embarrassing things about you if you are someone like Donald Trump. Let's see. We got to catch up. I guess we could discuss this later on in the week. But the latest on... Whoops, wait a minute. We don't want to do that one. This is the music we're looking for. There we are. That over the weekend, activity on the mifepristone front in finding the Supreme Court putting a brief hold on things, and at least for the first part of this week, saying that I think they're demanding briefings from the parties on this thing, but basically freezing the status quo in place in an attempt to reconcile the Washington state cases and the Texas state cases, and figure out what is the path forward for the FDA. So for the first part of the week, like through Wednesday, I think, Justice Alito, who oversees the Fifth Circuit, has said, all right, well, we want some briefings on this issue, but everybody freezes in place until then. Another interesting headline that I thought might bear some examination, but perhaps the examination will have to come tomorrow, just to throw that out there as an idea. Russians boasted that just 1% of the fake social profiles that they created or helped create are in fact caught in the end. That was apparently a part of the Discord chat room leak as well. We find out that Russians are aware of how well we're doing in uncovering their fake profiles and bragging about it, and we're leaking back to them that we now know that they've been bragging about it, and that ain't so great either.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Meanwhile, of course, next up, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. Lead off info here, Marjorie Taylor Greene's defense of the Air National Guardsman who posted classified documents online is grossly irresponsible. But guess what? She went ahead and did it anyway. I don't know why she loves traitors so much. We'll find out next.